Hey there, folks. This is Captain Christopher German coming to you for the podcast, which is going to be represented by the Current Affairs Times. And we're covering all the news across the globe that is fit to print, so to speak. And one of these stories that we're doing is an ongoing investigation into the grazing cattle. Now, this is a multi-state issue. I've been covering this aspect from Utah. Our guest today has been covering it from a number of different perspectives, and he is currently located in Arizona. And let me introduce you to Chris Bugbee, who is a conservation advocate located in Arizona. And Chris, tell me all about how you got into this idea of let's get these cows from trashing our planet.
Well, it's a huge issue here in the Western states. Growing beef cattle is the top commercial use of our public lands. So this is a private for-profit industry that is seriously and whole scale just degrading public lands in the West.
Well, and that's exactly how I went upon this. I was out walking around. I live here in Bullfrog, Utah, and I was walking around the deserts around here. And quite frankly, we hit cows all the time on this road out here. And you look at the fence lines, and they're all, completely shot down with refuse from the cows, and the cows have just torn it up. I've seen stream beds that have been absolutely torn apart. And then most recently, I showed you a video. I think you took a look at it up in the Henry Mountains at Stanton Pass. I put that video out last week, and there's just this half-mile swath that goes for 10 miles through this pristine wilderness of these beautiful mountains here that is just absolutely an absolute travesty. It's disgusting. There's cow crap everywhere. It smells. It's just, there's nothing growing there. It is absolutely devoid of life. And so that's kind of what you've hopped on a bunch of issues. You filed some lawsuits, have you not?
Yeah, and that the same scene that you're describing is the motivation to start filing these suits, and it's literally everywhere we go. My jurisdiction is primarily Arizona, but I also get into New Mexico. But we've filed suits on, Coronado National Forest, 2 different national conservation areas. Agua Fria National Monument is another one. Really nowhere is safe from this kind of land degradation that you've witnessed there in Utah as well.
Well, and that's the irony, and I think that's really why I want to get into this, is because the BLM around here and a lot of these places is responsible for maintaining these public spaces. And it is in their stated mission statement that their job is to protect these lands as well as provide for the public recreation. And quite frankly, I don't think they're protecting them. And quite frankly, the public recreation of these lands is definitely impeded by the fact that these cows are just absolutely trashing everything.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about, how are you attacking this problem? How did you start with this? Where was your first experiences, and how did you get into this kind of work?
Well, I moved out to Arizona back in 2008 and just fell in love with it. I've been here ever since, and it's an area that, for all its natural beauty, it needs a lot of work. It's been abused for decades, even I'm comfortable saying centuries. The desert ecosystems are very fragile, and here we are moving into this 1,000-year mega drought, and there's no response. There's no management response to adapt to that. We're still flooding our public lands with cattle, and we're seeing extreme impacts from that. And what you're going to find is the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service too, they are prioritizing cattle over anything else, and that's the reality that I'm seeing, that I've noticed since working for the center. Cows are number one. They get first shot at the land, and whatever's left, hey, save that, for the wildlife, for clean water.
Why do you think that is? Why are they prioritizing cows over wildlife, you think?
I think it's just a long-standing, it's always been kind of the cowboy influence here in the West. It's just how it's always been, unfortunately. And really, we're at a crossroads now with this drought. We need to start making some changes and start managing our land differently so that we can survive, and some of these imperiled animals can survive moving forward, because there's no indication this drought is gonna end anytime soon. This is the future that we're facing. And things are looking pretty grim out there.
Well, I was reading online a study that was done in Australia, and they were talking about how cows, when they get let out into wetlands, which is to say high rainfall areas, they do a lot of plotting, and they really pockmark the land, and they really trash things. We don't have that problem out west here. We have the opposite of that, which is we have incredibly dry conditions. How is a cow marching across a dry desert? I think I know the answer to this, so sorry to just feed you with this thing, but what does a cow do to a desert environment? What do you think it does?
Well, I look at cows as a non-native riparian animal. And when I say riparian, the riparian zones are the lush green ribbons of that follow the waterways throughout the desert. These thin ribbons of lush vegetation, and these are the places that cows congregate. Cows inherently seek these wet, cool, shady environments. So they'll spend up to 30 times longer in a wetland than they will in the uplands nearby. That's just their preference. So they're unlike bison in that capacity. In southeastern Arizona, where I work, this is an environment that did not evolve with large grazers. So here's a non-native animal creating tremendous amounts of disturbance and impact. It's an animal that just doesn't fit in this ecosystem. They've been here for decades, even centuries. Constant degradation. That's what they're doing.
Well, talk to me about the effect. I did an interview with the Utah Cattlemen's Association vice president, executive vice president, and he was saying that having cows in these areas can have a beneficial effect. And he is wildlife biologist that can tell you that it prevents animals from predating on other animals. And I had a tough time believing that, and he couldn't exactly stipulate why he believes such a thing. But what does this do to the wildlife of certain areas where the cows are heading out?
Well, I focus primarily on species that already have Endangered Species Act protection. So these are officially listed as endangered and threatened species. One of them is the yellow-billed cuckoo, and this is an animal that's disappeared from over 80% of its former range because of loss of riparian habitat, and cattle are a big part of that. So they're coming into these desert streams. First of all, they're trampling and increasing the sediment loads. They're urinating, they're defecating in the water, which is reducing the water quality. They're denuding all the vegetation outright, leaving everything uncovered, leaving nothing left for native wildlife, right down to insects and small mammals. Having cattle in the stream is basically, you're going to end up with a wider, more shallow stream that is exposed to the sunlight. That in itself is removing breeding grounds for native fish. And what we're seeing is, on top of the drought, these cattle effects are just exacerbating everything. Creeks are drying up. Big trees like cottonwood and willow, they're not replenishing themselves because the cows are eating all the seedlings and saplings. So what we see is a bunch of old trees and no recruitment coming up, no future forest. And all these things together is just killing our riparian areas. And we've already lost over 90% of what we once had here in the Southwest is already gone from human activity. And really keeping the cattle out there on the land is the nail in the coffin. Well,
why is this not a bigger issue? Why are more people not aware of this? Why are so many people saying, "Oh, I love my steak," when they also say at the same time, "I want to protect our wildlife"? Why? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the most frustrating thing to me is that less than 2% of all the U.S. beef supply comes from these Western landscapes. And so if we got rid of all public land grazing in the West, it wouldn't even change the price of beef in the country. So when I hear people say, "Oh, but you got to feed the people, people have to eat," it's not, they don't need this food source. They just don't need it. And the price tag that comes along with its production it doesn't justify the industry.
Really? Well, one of the conversations that I had with the with the Utah cattleman guy was that he says that Utah, in our particular way, is kind of like the nursery of cattle breeding around the country, because it doesn't sustain the cattle for feed purposes to get them ready for market. So what they do is they park them here, they pop out those babies, they stay there all winter long, and when just as the spring floods are coming through here and the greenery starts to pop up, everything starts eating all that stuff, so it kills it for the entire season. And then once they finally are weaned from their mothers and it's all said and done sometime around June, they pile them into trucks and they drive them off across the country to someplace else to fatten them up for market. This just seems like the most environmentally and ecologically insensitive possible thing that you could possibly do, and makes me want to eat chicken nuggets for the rest of my life.
Correct. Yeah, I know. I've quit eating beef completely.
Well, I had beef tacos last night, so I can't say I want to swear off beef completely. And I think that's an important point to make, is that this is not an indictment on the beef industry. This is not an indictment on cattle in general, but this is rather, I think, the misuse of the land and the abuse of the land by certain bad actors, correct?
Ultimately, it's the federal agencies that are signing off on this, and that's who we bring our lawsuits to. You know, we're not targeting individual ranchers. We're targeting the agencies that are allowing this to happen.
Well, and specifically like the BLM around here and the U.S. Forest Service around and other places and whatnot. How does that mechanism work? How do they permit it? How do they? Could you brief us a little bit on how these public agencies are really culpable in this pattern?
Well, yeah, they're authorizing the activity. They set the number for how many cow-calf pairs can be out there, and they make all the rules on where they can graze, everything like that. What we use is, we engage in the NEPA process, but really that, from my experience, that doesn't get us anywhere. Really, our only avenue is through litigation. That's the only way we can get through and make our voices heard.
Well, we had a fun conversation about your how the public is viewing you in some cases, and you kind of thought I was going to make you the villain of this whole thing, and I'm not trying to do that. But have you had a lot of pushback? Have you had a lot of people saying, you're just wrong and we don't like you because of that?
Well, perhaps, I'm sure. Yeah. It doesn't change anything on my end. I fight for conservation, period. That's my priority.
Well, and I think that's kind of what this investigation is really showing, is that it is not an indictment of the entire beef industry, and it certainly isn't an indictment of beef eaters, but this is a problem with the federal government's mismanagement of programs, and the fact that the federal government is the one that is largely saying, yeah, go ahead, rape this country as much as you want, take as much as you want out of it, all in the name of private interest.
Correct.
Well, sir, I don't want to take too much of your time up, but before we completely sign off here, can you tell me what the future might look like? How's your litigation going? What's happening with all the different fights that you're fighting? Are you making progress on this? Is this something we're going to actually win someday, you think?
I sure hope so. This battle's been going on for a long time. There used to be a cattle free by 1993 program. So that, it's been decades that people have been working to make some kind of meaningful change to the way our Western public lands are managed. I really don't see, especially in the context of this mega drought, I don't see that public lands ranching is the future use of public land. Ultimately, we're going to have to use our national forests to conserve wildlife and water. That's just the reality of it now. We're experiencing almost every year, it seems we're breaking heat and drought records here in the Southwest. I mean, this isn't something that's coming. We've already stepped through that threshold. And so it's time to make some change.
Well, and that's what I'm hoping by this investigation, I can open some eyes to this, and I can get some people to understand that, this is not about indictments of anybody, but this is just about making the right public decisions for the public good.
And I can't cost benefit analysis, really.
Well, it truly is that, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm Captain Christopher German. This is the Current Affairs Times. And Chris Bugbee, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for being here. And if you would like to find out more about this information, we've published several articles about this, and we're going to be continuing to investigate this until somebody at BLM decides to sit down and answer some questions. So thanks for watching today, and we'll be back with you next week and hopefully have some more answers for you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.